Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we will have one research clinic in Arcade project, and our presenter is Dr. Mariano Salazar. He is a postdoc in Department of Public Health Sciences, Karolinska Institutet, Sweden, and he will give his presentation on the topic is respectable, disreputable, or rightful. Young Nicaraguan women's discourse on femininity, intimate partner violence, and sexual abuse. Before Dr. Mariano starts, I just want to give his brief introduction. Dr. Mariano is a Nicaraguan social epidemiologist with a background in medicine and surgery, and medicine and gender equality, with a Ph.D. in public health and master in science in epidemiology. Dr. Mariano has extensive research experience, as a medical doctor and a social epidemiologist, conducting qualitative and quantitative research on women's health and well-being in low and middle income settings. We also have a discussant, Ulla. Ulla she's from University of Tampere in Finland. And Ulla is a social scientist with background in political sciences and public health. She has conducted research on child health related issues, mainly in Africa. In the current project, she is responsible for studies that examine child nutrition in the local context from the perspective of mothers and other caregivers. Her study methods include direct observation in household and repeated in-depth interviews as well, surveys. So what we will do is, Dr. Mariano will present first, around 20 minutes, and then Ulla will have, she can discuss Mariano's findings, and then this will be open for questions to all the participants. Okay, Mariano, can you start?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present my research in this forum. The topic is about discourses and femininities in relationship to intimate partner violence in my home country, Nicaragua. As you can see, the title is Respectable, disreputable, or rightful. Young Nicaraguan women discourses on femininity, intimate partner violence, and sexual abuse. A grounded theory situational analysis. This is a study that was conducted with two colleagues from UMIA University, Dr. Isabel Goicolea and Dr. Anne Ullman from the Department of Public Health at UMIA University. Okay, so why are we doing this study? You know, usually intimate partner violence, men's intimate partner violence and sexual abuse toward women are one of the most common forms of violence against women around the world and of course in Nicaragua. Violence against women is shaped by many factors in which gender and social norms plays a decisive role. While we were doing a review for this paper, we found that there are a lot of extensive research has been conducted on masculinities and its relationship to violence against women. But there was not that much conducted on femininities and its association with violence against women. Thus, we concluded that the need for studies exploring the discourses, actions, and norms allowing femininities to exist, resist, and comply to men's hegemony are important. Why do we also choose to do that? Because mapping current femininities is crucial, since it has been highlighted that key societal changes, such as the emergence of the civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and change in the economic status of women, have spurred a significant change in the way femininities are constructed. And this is especially important because the social construction of femininities and masculinities are represented in or everyday discourses, in the way we talk about these issues. Also, it's important to identify the discourses, because understanding how the different persons in a society construct femininity and masculinity is very important to comprehend how different forms of violence are enacted in a given setting. And also it's important to clarify that the way that we act as men and the way that women act as women is not static. These gender relations are fluid and they are open to contestation, and they change over time. So it's not the same, for example, the way that men behaved 50 years ago, 30 years ago, that's the way that men behave today, for example, and the same apply to femininities as well. So, Nicaragua, where is Nicaragua? I was recently in India, and I was talking with some friends there, and they say, Nicaragua? Where is that? I mean, it's a very, very small country, really. So Nicaragua is located in the Central America, actually in the middle of the American continent. It has a population of 5 million, with 6 out of 10 people living in an urban setting. Half of the population are women, and it has a life expectancy of 79 years. We are a poor country with almost half of the population classified as poor. However, the general position of the country regarding some reproductive indicators is not that bad. For example, we have a global fertility rate of 3 children per woman, and the use of contraception use among partnered women is high, like 70%. And undernutrition for children is more long-term undernutrition rather than acute undernutrition, as you can see in the slide. Specifically, the study was conducted in one city, León, which you can see the picture. There is a church where we come from. So, is really violence a problem in Nicaragua? Yes, indeed. When we talk about intimate partner violence, we mean the violence that a woman experiences from a current or former partner. By partner, it could be boyfriend, living-in partner, husband, and so on. As you can see, for example, for the last survey, national survey from 2007, around half of the women that were interviewed have experienced some form of emotional abuse. And emotional abuse, we mean yelling and so on from a partner. And then around 1/4 of the women have ever experienced physical abuse and from a partner. And then sexual abuse from a partner, 1 out of 10 women have experienced sexual abuse. So it's an issue that is there in the society, and we need to address that issue if we want to diminish the number of women who are experiencing abuse from a partner. But what has been done in Nicaragua? Nicaragua is an interesting society because we had a revolution during the 1970s that led to a revolutionary government during the 1980s that introduced a lot of changes to improve women's situation in general. And there are some milestones as well that were fueled by research conducted by Dr. Mary Ellsberg that contributed to changes in the way that the laws were constructed. For example, in 1992, there was a reform of one of the laws in the country that increased the severity of punishment of sexual offenders. For example, before that, in order to prove that a woman was abused, someone have to run a court over the women and the men's body, and if that person could not separate both men and women's body, then it was abuse. It was a silly, very, very silly way of defining abuse, and then, of course, abusers were protected in that way. But that was changed in 1992. Then in 1994, the government, with support from the international community, started the women and children police stations, which were special entities within the police that had the task to handle family violence and child abuse cases. In 1996, there was a law, the passing of the family violence law, to protect victims and punish offenders. This was a very, very comprehensive law. And in 2012, there was a modification of the previous law that included new types of violence against women, for example, economic violence, patrimonial violence, and also defined femicide, and among other changes. So a lot has happened in the last 20 years regarding the laws available in this setting. But not everything has been quite nice. For example, in 2006, the government banned therapeutic abortions, meaning that no woman can have an abortion even if her life is in danger. This was a silly movement that was spurred by the political negotiations of the government with the church by that time. And also the law that was approved in 2012 was strongly contested, and it was changed so that women who have experienced abuse from their partners, they have to do a mediation, which means they have to sit and try to fix the relationship with the partner before they can go further, and that's really a big problem in this type of violence, because of the power relationships between men and women. We have the women and children police stations, yet we lack human and material resources to really provide an answer to the users who use them. And one of the important things is that in the public health sector, which is the strongest provider of health for Nicaraguan, we do not ask women about abuse, and that is a problem in itself, because many women use this public health sector, and we are not able to screen them and to provide them with options, or give them information about other places in their environment where they can get help. And we are missing opportunities by not asking women about the abuse they experience. So, in a previous paper, we have explored the relationship between masculinities and violence against women, how Nicaraguan men understand violence against women, and how they construct masculinity in relationship to that. And so in this paper, we kind of said, okay, we need to see what is the other side of the coin. We need to see what women think about violence, and how do they construct their femininities in association with violence against women. So this is the aim of our study. This is León municipality. The place where we conducted the studies is located in León department, Nicaragua, and León is the second largest city in Nicaragua with around 500,000 individuals. And this is a part of the surveillance system that is ongoing in that setting. So this study was a qualitative study. We conducted 8 focus group discussions with 59 urban and rural women aged between 15 and 31 years. We use a theoretical sampling to select our or participants, which pretty much meant the following. Let me give you an example. We did the first focus group discussion with educated women from an urban setting, and then we said, okay, now we got these findings. Now we want to see what non-educated women from an urban setting think in order to compare. And then we explore that and we move to the rural areas. Also trying to look for educated or non-educated women as well, so that we could have we could explore what if there was any variation in the discourses regarding the place where they were living, either urban or rural, or the level of education. The analysis was used using situational analysis as developed by Clark, and this is a technique that evolved from grounded theory. And what we did is that we identified the discourses and then positioned the discourses in relationship to two axes of variation. And we present two models in which we describe the discourses that we found in this setting. Okay, so this is the first finding, and let me explain this graph to you. On your horizontal axis, you have gender power relations and women's subordination continuum. So within this continuum of variation, it can go from embracing unequal gender power relations to striving for gender power equality and women's autonomy. So the discourses, the way that women think could vary, are going to be within that range. On the vertical axis, we have the responsibility continuum. Who is responsible for the violence that women experience? And that can range from full women responsibility for physical intimate partner violence to full men's responsibility for physical intimate partner violence, and everything in between. Okay, so regarding, and this model is only for physical intimate partner violence and women's autonomy. So what women think, what were the three discourses that we identified? The first one is a contested traditional femininity discourse, where they are pretty much saying, okay, women are to blame for the abuse they experience from their partners, because they are unable to control them. They are unable to control and to prevent these behaviors. But they say, that very important, that controlling behavior, that the partner controls the women's actions, the women's movements, it's sometimes justified, not always, but sometimes justified. When there is, where women, for example, are not acting as respectful as they are expected to be in the society. But this is a discourse that was pretty much contested by the other two discourses identified in the data. If you move to the, what will that be, to the right side of the, no, I mean, yeah. If you look at the other discourses on the right side of the screen, then you have something that we have called an ambivalent modern femininity discourse. In this discourse, women are saying that women must have autonomy and they should not be controlled by their partners. However, they are saying, also saying that women should not experience violence, but some women who stay in violent relationships stay there because they want. So it's kind of assigning responsibility. Assigning responsibility to both the men and the women for the violence that women experience. And then the last discourse in relationship to this issue is something that we have named pro-women's rights resistant discourse. This discourse is pretty much saying that there is no justification for the physical violence that women experience, and that women must have full autonomy and should not be controlled by their partners. The next model is pretty much talks about sexual abuse. What do women think about sexual abuse and who's responsible about the sexual abuse? So on the horizontal axis, we have the responsibility for sexual abuse, starting from men not responsible for the sexual abuse of women to men fully responsible for the sexual abuse of women. And on the vertical axis, we are displaying how women construct femininities, and especially the concept of respectability. How respectable is a woman in relationship to the abuse that they experience? And we found a dichotomous, two different construction of respectability. One, that women are constructed either as a seductress or she's respectable, and then our women are constructed as rightful individuals, which means that respectability really doesn't define womanhood in this discourse. So again, we identified three discourses who are common in this setting. The first one to the left, a contested traditional discourse, is pretty much saying that men are not responsible for the sexual abuse of women because men are unable to control their sexual drive, and also women's inappropriate behavior will foster sexual violence. And it's pretty much justify the sexual violence and put all the blame of the violence on the women. The second discourse that we have called ambivalent modern femininity discourse has a similar yet different approach. It overlaps with the previous one. And you can see that they say in this discourse pretty much about, yes, men are partially responsible of the sexual abuse because they can control themselves, so they are partially responsible, but also women inappropriate behavior can foster sexual violence. So in this case, the blame is a shared blame. So women have certain blame and men have certain blame. And the final discourse is the most advanced discourse, and that this discourse pretty much is saying that men are fully responsible for the sexual abuse of women, and it doesn't matter how you are constructed as respectful or not. Is women's right to be free of violence, and the way you dress, the way you act doesn't have to be used as a justification for the sexual abuse that women experience in this setting. So, what can we conclude in this study? Our findings indicate that there is a possible change in the way that femininities are constructed in the Latin American setting. One of the dominant discourse showed that among young women, the socially accepted femininity is portrayed as enacting attributes that are usually bestowed to men, such as independence and agency, while still there are some patriarchal conceptions, like the construction of women as respectable or not, that limits women's agency. And the tolerance that women have to intimate partner violence and sexual abuse is strongly influenced by how the women are constructed are respectable or not, and how they enact the agency that the dominant discourse bestows to them. A good thing is that we also found a pro-women's right resistance discourse that constructs femininity and advocates nonviolence from a human rights perspective. So, one of the recommendations for policymakers in this setting is that interventions challenging patriarchy must aim to strengthen the positive aspect of the progressive femininity discourses identified in this paper and discourage the social construction of women as respectable, since this concept hinders women's claims for non-violence and autonomy. Thank you very much.
Ula to give her comments.
Okay, thank you very much. A thumbs up if everybody can hear me. Send a chat to Elda if you have problems in hearing. First, I would like to start off by thanking Mariano for sharing this very topical paper draft with us. I'm sure it rings bells in all of the continents because many discussions about women's positions, etc., are linked to this topic. And we shouldn't really forget about the Nordic countries where every now and then things about women's position pop up, even if we think we are 100% equal. So, Elda or Mariano, is it possible that we discuss, or should I just give a monotone talk? I would prefer to talk to Mariano.
Yes, fine. Let's discuss.
Mariano, I don't enjoy listening to my own voice too much. So, Mariano, really, as I was saying, this is almost ready to go. A draft article, and I don't think we need to go into any nitty-gritty details about functionings and typos and things like that. I'm happy to send those to you later on by email or something. But which journal is it that you are aiming to? And is it more like applied research or theoretical research?
We are aiming, well, actually the paper is accepted in Journal of Aggression, Maltreatment and Trauma. And I think it's a combination of both applied and theoretical research, because the findings from this study, show how we need to deconstruct the construction of women as respectable or not in order to be able to start diminishing the number of women who experience sexual abuse or intimate partner violence in this setting, and I think elsewhere, where women are constructed using this dichotomy of either you are, the saint, or you are the witch, or whichever construction is used in these settings.
Okay, so what I'm gathering in between the lines anyway is that it's not like social science theory, but it's more like people in health sector using this kind of reading this kind of information that could be applied to their own research. Or
yes, I think I think it should be open for, I would say that it should be open for anyone who is aiming to change gender social construction of masculinity and femininity. To challenge the traditional social construction and to see what are the key aspects that need to be challenged.
Okay. All right. Because my point number one is that you should always write to the audience, and you should carefully read the earlier articles in the journal. I think this applies generally to everything that you are writing, isn't it? Okay. And then, as I was saying, I don't think we should go through the paper line by line or anything like that. But what I was doing when reviewing or reading this was that I went back to a few qualitative research checklists that many of the journals use, and they recommend for the Peter or maybe Elda can do it, but there are at least three main ones. One is consolidated criteria for reporting qualitative studies. The other one is RATS, Qualitative Research Review Guidelines and CASP Critical Appraisal Skills Program. Mariano, are you familiar with all those?
Yes, I am familiar with the guidelines for reporting qualitative research. Yes.
Okay, and there are quite a few of them, and also some journals have combined lists of their own, and there are some books providing some lists. So I think point number 2 is to study those carefully, and I'm sure you have done your homework. But in general, I think the checklists have comments about the main domains in an article, like study design, analysis, research methods, and what is specific for reporting qualitative research in those checklists is that they also ask for reporting about the research team, right? Because in qualitative research is more part of the process and data collection and reporting results as in quantitative research, or that's what we say. We can always talk about that, how much true that is. So can I ask you a question about the way you report the role of the research team in the paper? And I'm really not saying that you should change anything in the article, because I do think that it's ready to go. But I think it's just an interesting topic to discuss. I'm not sure, but I think you didn't really report the sex or the gender of the interviewer in the paper. So do you think you should report it? And another thing you didn't really report is the language and how you used it.
Yes.
So do you have any more thoughts about those two issues?
Well, yes. Thank you for that question. I'm not sure, but just to clarify, I conducted all the focus group discussions, and some people can say that a man being asking about these issues with women, that could somehow be difficult because of challenges to achieve the rapport with the interviewees. But I found it that it was not the case. I have conducted experience. I have conducted interviews and focus group discussion with women before, and regarding these sensitive issues on violence. And I think it's the way that you approach the women, the attitude of the interviewer and the focus group organizer, rather than the gender. Is how open and how sensitive you are to listen to women rather than the gender of the interviewer. That has been my experience, and I found that there was no problem whatsoever. Actually, women spoke quite a lot during the focus group discussions, and they were usually going from 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. And also, what was the other question? Yes, and also the language was in Spanish, and the interviews, the focus group discussions were conducted in Spanish, and I'm fluent in Spanish, and also in Nicaraguan Spanish, because it is spoken differently. So I could also understand the difference in the way that women spoke and so on. So this was, I could say, an advantage. And also the transcripts were read by the other reviewers, by the other co-authors, and they also speak Spanish, and so it was a good exercise in that way.
Okay, so now my point was just for the future papers you are writing, that you might want to think if you should report about the sex and gender of the person who conducts these interviews. It might be of interest, but also I think if the space allows, you might want to describe that even if it was a sensitive issue, as you were pointing out, you didn't find any problems in doing the interviews.
No. I think it's of course, we have started the focus group discussion, like trying to build rapport, and I think we were successful in that way. And once women started to discuss about these issues, the focus group discussion was more an interaction between them rather than me asking questions and they answering. Because what we use vignettes describing situations where one woman was experiencing physical violence and then another woman was experiencing sexual violence. So we described the vignette, and then it was like magic. I will say the women would start speaking, like, oh, I don't think that is right, or yes, I do think that is right, and so on. So that facilitated a lot the discussion.
And from my own experience, I can tell from several countries in Africa that I have been working with men, talking with women, and it doesn't seem to be a problem in there either. And even if oftentimes people say that you can't talk about sensitive issues with a different sex or gender, it doesn't seem to be true. And I completely agree with you that it really depends how you do it and what your attitude towards the other people is, and how you manage to build rapport in the beginning of the interaction. All right, so that was about research team. Then I would like to discuss with you a little bit about the study design and maybe about the analysis. As you were already showing to the group that your aim was to explore and position discourses in Nicaragua about women, how women understand the femininities, and you used focus groups to collect your data, right? So let me start off by a very naive question. Why did you choose to use focus group discussions instead of some other options that were probably feasible also?
Thank you for that question. I think when we go back to the literature and see that focus group discussions are mainly used to gather data on social norms. So in this case, we wanted to gather data on social norms. What do women as a group think about femininities and violence against women? And also, it was important to do that. We did focus group discussions because we, in the discussion in itself between the focus group participants, they could, as a researcher, you could identify the different discourses at the different positions that will arise from that. Probably I could have used in-depth interviews, but I wasn't really exploring individual experiences and was rather focusing on societal norms. So for societal norms, the best tool available is to have focus group discussions so that the individuals, the participant can discuss and you can see what is the variation in the societal norms. Yeah, that's why we choose focus group discussions specifically.
Okay, it makes a lot of sense. And then if we go on about the study design, you said that you used grounded theory, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a method by Glasser and Strauss already from the 1960s. And then you used Clark's more recent, some sort of an updating of the grounded theory, right? So when I was studying a long time ago, and that is really long time ago, we been a lot of work on the theory after that. And what I gather is that Clarke has resisted the positivist tendencies in the theory and some sort of oversimplification on that. So, but still, I think the discovery of explanations is embedded in grounded theory. So, what are your ideas about that? Was that your aim? And I think the basic question is, when you chose your approach to the data, was the grounded theory number one choice all the way through, or did you have any other choices?
It's a very good question, and I think that I have used pure grounded theory before for some of my qualitative studies, and one of the limitations that I have found with grounded theories is when you construct the categories and you construct the models, that the categories need to be mutually exclusive. You cannot have a code in one category and have it the same code in another one. And sometimes that construction of grounded theory really doesn't reflect the reality that you find in the data. What I like about situational analysis is that it allows me to have very it allows me to have to follow the steps of grounded theory, but also it gives me the freedom, instead of constructing categories, to construct discourses, and discourses can overlap, as we can see. And that is very important to show, because we do not have pure, uncontested discourses as they emerge from the data. We see a lot of overlapping, and that is what is happening in real life. I think it's important to show that for some ways, in some topics, there is not overlapping, but it is overlapping, and it's important to show how do they overlap and how do they vary. This situational grounded theory, situational analysis, as developed by Clarke, it builds on the techniques of grounded theory, but it's also a modification with the inclusion of the discourse, the discourses instead of the categories. But it also allows the researcher to display models when you can display the different discourses and the overlapping. And I found that very good, because it allowed me to show what the women were saying, and of course, constructing the discourses from the bottom up, more like an inductive process rather than a deductive.
I guess the learning point here is, and what your reviewers in the end will check, is that you have your research question, okay, and whether that theoretical approach that you have chosen matches your research question. And as you explain it like you do it like now, I think it matches quite okay. If I was your reviewer, I wouldn't have anything to comment about that. And another option to me might have been, if you want to go to these old guys from the 1960s or 70s, it might be Goffman's framework analysis, which is very similar, and there has been many researchers developing it that further. And I think the result might be a little bit similar. But Goffman is more like structuralist, and he doesn't stick to the realities, but it really talks about how people enact, how they construct their lives in their talk. I can see that we don't have too much time anymore. If we go like 10 more minutes or something like that.
Yep.
Okay, because my next point is, if we get more philosophical on the way, is that think of focus group as a method, you can start thinking what kind of evidence these focus groups provide to you. And I think the conventional use of focus group is that you think that, okay, there is a truth of the world somewhere, and focus groups provide information of the issues people talk about, like in your case, like abuse and violence and things like that, or how men and women have behaved and how they what is happening in the society in more general, right? But I think in your case you have chosen an alternative way to use focus groups, which is more like constructionist, which I think you are saying in your article. And this means that, at least to me, that you don't think that focus groups would provide you a window to the reality, but there are like an excellent way of examining social understanding of the situation, and social relationships then become interesting. And what I think, what I was missing in the article, if you take this structuralist that you don't really talk about the social relationships within the groups. And I don't know if you have been considering that, and if you have left it out because of space limitations or something like that. But I remember that somebody, and I can check the reference later, has said that the reality what is represented in the focus groups is collaboratively produced.
Yes.
Says.
Well.
So,
yes.
Then the opinions and everything is like generated between the people, and I think that is something what I would like to now discuss, and maybe think if it was possible to include that in the draft.
Indeed, the focus group discussions, as far as my knowledge goes, they are used to look at societal norms, and societal norms are socially constructed. So it's what the interaction between the individuals in the focus group discussions are going to kind of give me a picture of what are the social norms who are present there. One of the things about the focus group discussions is that also that you can choose how to do them. For example, you can choose focus group to be homogeneous. In that case, the participants share more or less the same characteristics, same age, same education or socioeconomical position. So that's one of the things that some people have said. It's good to do it that way because you wouldn't have class differences or age difference where one will dominate the discussion just because that person is older or that person is richer or that person is more important. In our case, our focus group discussion, we aim to have an homogeneous focus group so that the women will feel that they were between peers and they can talk about these issues. Yes, and also, of course, we conducted different focus group discussions with women with different characteristics. So, for example, we didn't mix urban and rural women, so that rural women could feel more open to express their views and not be somehow intimidated by being with urban women, for example.
But what I mean is that in the actual focus group situation, when somebody started talking and the next one continued, and then there was maybe a third one who continued, I think that's a process how they created the categories that you are reporting, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm kind of thinking that would it be interesting or somehow meaningful to report that process and to elaborate on that more?
Yes, I think you're right. It could be improved definitely, and but the idea that we wanted to show in the paper is that the discourses are constructed by no the discourses are expressed by the participants, and we construct the discourses from an inductive perspective. Yeah, we take what they say and we kind of control the discourses, but based on what these women were telling us in the focus group discussion. And of course there is an interaction. And that's the idea of the focus group discussion, that they discuss, that they do not agree on everything, because that will show us the variation of the social norms, what people think and how these things vary from different people in different places.
And one more idea that I had when I was reading your text was that you are now reporting like what questions, what the women are saying.
Mm-hmm.
But there would be some space for analyzing also why questions. Do they give you that kind of talk, that you would be able to understand why they end up saying something like this? Or why some things are socially more acceptable than others?
I think yes, there is something that can also be explored. I think in this case the paper was about describing the discourses. We didn't go into detail on the why. I think for qualitative researchers, we usually don't ask women why are they saying those things, because the reasons or there could be the why is a different approach. I'd rather ask women how do they do that, so I can get my own conclusions about why. But indeed, I think we will need to talk again with the women to kind of be sure about why do they see that there are these different construction in society. But that is something to be done in the future. I think a further research. Now that we have identified the discourses, we kind of we need to understand why do these people think that you have this variation.
Yeah, and I'm not really saying that you should go and ask why, but from the material you already have now, how the women comment to each other, you probably can find quite a few why answers.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
So if we still use two minutes to discuss your conclusions, I think if you had a little bit of this why question, I think it would make your conclusion stronger.
Okay.
And my only conclusion part is that I find it very interesting. But I think now you are putting a lot of eggs into one basket, talking about chains in the talk, meaning in the attitudes. And since you have your study is a cross-sectional study with no quantitative data, I think it's kind of betting on one horse with the reviewers. You have done it. You base your conclusions more on earlier literature, saying that there is chains. And I have tried to see what you say. You say that femininities are on the move. Women's recognitions of men's responsibilities increasing. And you say this twice, women's increasing recognitions of men's responsibility. So do you think that's the only way to conclude on these interviews?
Indeed, I think that the construction of femininities as social construction of men and women, of women, they have changed. We have evidence from all over the world. Also, masculinities have changed. They are not static, but they are in a constant state of change. Indeed, we did not conduct focus group discussion with the older women, so to speak, so that we can assert what are the social construction of femininity, or we didn't also conduct this focus group discussion 10 years ago or 20 years ago so that we can compare. In that way, that is a limitation of the study. But what we have, when we say about change, we also refer to published manuscripts and compare to the literature that's saying that women thought about these issues in a certain way. And I think that somehow provides some validation to the issue that we are finding. We always compare. We try to compare with what women said before in the 80s and in the 70s, and or what is published data, and then we can see that there is some change. Of course, if we look from the what is the best for research, the best could have been to have conducted focus group discussion and interviews on these issues 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, so we can see how the discourses changed, if any. But that is somehow challenging to, and yeah, we choose to compare with what is already known in the setting, and there is a lot that has been written about that. So yes, we hint that there is a change based on what we compare with the literature, but then it's yeah, it has its limitations, and I absolutely agree with you.
Okay, my last question goes here. What about if you conclude based on your focus groups, just based on the materials that you collected? What would be your conclusion based on just those interviews? If you don't use previous literature.
I think the key finding here is that women, most of the discourses reject violence against women, intimate partner violence, but sexual abuse of women is justified more often than physical abuse of women, and that has to do with constructing women as respectable or not. And in spite of all the changes that these women are the discourse of the women, I mean, rejecting, traditional norms, saying that women should be the housewife, that should women not work. But in spite of all those changes, the fact that the concept for respectability is still there and very, very strong, it hinders what can be done in society. I mean, you have to deconstruct, you have to start saying that women are not more valuable because of their perceived respectability. No one has the right to rape a woman just because she's wearing, a short skirt, or because she's showing some skin. That's to me is the best. That is the main finding, that deconstruct this construction of women are respectable or not, because that is justifying the violence in some sense, the sexual violence, but not the physical violence.
So when you put it like that, what you was just describing, I think it makes a much stronger conclusion than talking about the change. The change is of course there.
Yeah.
But I think you described the conclusion very well now. I think it's much stronger.
Thank you.
But that's, of course, something for you to think about.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important. I mean, because we can see that, when we talk about violence, it used to be, at least in our setting, that women used to tolerate the violence, and the society will also pressure women to tolerate the violence. They will say, stay with your partner because it's the father of your children, stay because it's better for the children to have a family, and so on. But now that has changed. Women are saying that, no, you don't have to stay with that guy, leave him. But that has changed regarding physical abuse, but not sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is still, we have this blaming of women just because the way they dress, because the way they act, and we are not recognizing men's responsibility on these issues. I mean, we are partially recognizing responsibility, but still there is some blame placed on the woman just because she was not dressing right, because she was drinking, because she was not acting respectable. So that's
I think that finding has some importance not only for Nicaragua but also globally.
yeah.
So I think that's something you should try.
And I was wondering that you have conducted research in the Nordic countries. What about respectability in the Nordic countries? How do that? Is this a social construction as well? How do that is perceived here in relationship with sexual abuse, for example?
I think it is there underneath the surface when like newspapers report rape cases and something like that. There is always discussion like that. Even if we think it's not politically correct and women should be able to walk around half naked or whatever they wish, it is still there in the society. Yes. And, even more in Africa.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, definitely. I mean, this construction.
So that's why I'm saying it has some global importance in the societies all over the world. I would think also in Asia.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the time that you have put in reading the manuscript and all the very insightful comments and the discussion.
Thank you for sharing the manuscript with me. I think it was really a very interesting manuscript to read.
Thank you very much, Ulla. If anyone from the audience would like to add something or have a question, please go on now.
Either it was very clear or it was so boring that nobody had questions. Yes, here.
Yeah.
I think it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a very nice presentation. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share, listen the good presentation. My question about the sample selection. Why did you select the age between 15 to 31 only?
Oh, yes. The sample is in qualitative research. We are not aiming for the sampling procedure is more purposive rather than statistically significant. In a way, we wanted to identify those individuals who can give us the information, but we didn't choose them randomly. Rather, we invite the people and they came. And that is the difference between quantitative and qualitative sampling procedures. We do not choose them. We didn't even calculate a sample size because it's not needed. It's rather if we can get the variation, rather in qualitative research, we use something that is called saturation of the information, which means that you continue doing focus group discussions until there is nothing new arising from the material. That is one difference from quantitative research. We don't calculate sample size. We don't know.
And did you operationalize the sexual abuse or intimate partner violence or physical violence before collecting the data?
Yes, what we did is that we created vignettes, like little stories. And for example, there was one like this. Maria and Juan, they have been living together for some years. Maria, once they were walking on the street, and Maria said hello to a friend. And then when they got home, Juan started arguing about that, and he slapped her in the face. That was the vignette, and then we said, what do you think about that? And let the women speak. And then the other one, a sexual abuse, was a similar. Let's say there was this Maria was in a party. She was wearing a tank top and she was wearing a short skirt. She started drinking and flirting with some men, and then she left the party and someone tried to rape her. So what do you think about that? Those were the construction rather than presenting cases and to let the women speak their minds about what they think.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate all the questions.
So if there are,
So if there's no question,
yeah, Vishal?
Yes?
can we conclude this session? Is there a question from Ujjin? So there is no question from. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. So
Vishal, then you can conclude.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Okay, I thank you all, Mariano for this good presentation, Ula for comments. I'm thankful to all the participants from Ujjain and Mumbai, also from IHCAR Jaipur, and from China also. Thank you very much. We will soon have a new, next research seminar next month from IIT Gandhinagar. Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.